What if I told you that one of the most famous sports dramas of all time almost had a completely different soundtrack, was inspired by real letters discovered in a drawer, and nearly failed to find an audience until the Oscars saved it? Chariots of Fire 1981 is remembered for its uplifting message and iconic slow-motion running scene. But behind the cameras, the story of how it was made is full of unexpected twists. Today, we're looking at weird facts about Chariots of Fire that will make you see this film in a whole new light. A film born from forgotten letters. The inspiration for Chariots of Fire came when producer David Putnam read about two British runners of the 1924 Olympics, Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams. What's strange is that much of the detail used in the film came from letters and journals that had been sitting unnoticed for decades. These personal writings, rediscovered by relatives and historians, gave the screenwriters unique insight into the motivations and personalities of both men. Without these forgotten papers, the movie's deep portrayal of faith, determination, and cultural tension would have been impossible. What makes it weirder is that Hollywood had little interest in making a movie about British Olympic runners in the first place. The fact that an old drawer full of letters ultimately led to an Academy Award-winning Best Picture shows how sometimes history hides its greatest stories in dusty corners. The title comes from a hymn. One of the oddest things about Chariots of Fire is its title. Many people assume it refers to racing glory, but the phrase actually comes from a line in the William Blake poem "And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time," which was later set to music as the hymn Jerusalem. The line, "Bring me my chariot of fire," inspired Putnam to choose it as the film's title. However, the hymn itself is not about athletics, but about spirituality and building a better world. The connection between Blake's mystical vision and 1920s Olympic runners is unusual, but it gave the movie a poetic resonance. Strangely, some early marketing executives disliked the title, fearing audiences would think it was a science fiction film, but the name stuck and eventually became iconic. Today, the phrase "Chariots of Fire" is instantly linked with triumph, determination, and, of course, slow-motion running. The iconic theme was almost rejected. The film's most famous element is undeniably Vangelis' electronic score, especially the theme that plays during the slow-motion beach run. But here's the weird part. The music almost didn't make it into the film. Some producers felt synthesizers were too modern for a period drama set in the 1920s. They pushed for a traditional orchestral score instead. Director Hugh Hudson, however, believed Vangelis' sound created timeless emotion, contrasting the period setting with something fresh. His gamble paid off. The score became one of the most recognizable in film history, winning the Academy Award for Best Original Score. Without it, Chariots of Fire might never have achieved its lasting cultural impact. Even stranger, the famous beach run was originally shot as a simple training montage. It was the music that transformed it into an unforgettable cinematic moment, proving how one creative decision can define a film forever. The beach scene was a nightmare to shoot. That iconic slow-motion running sequence on the beach at St. Andrews, Scotland, looks simple and elegant on screen. In reality, it was chaotic and miserable to film. The weather was freezing, the wind relentless, and the sand difficult to run on repeatedly. Many of the extras portraying athletes weren't actually trained runners, leading to multiple injuries and falls during the takes. The cameras frequently jammed due to sand and moisture, forcing the crew to reset again and again. What seems like a serene moment of triumph actually took days of grueling effort to capture. To make things stranger, locals on the beach at the time thought they were watching a low-budget television commercial, not realizing they were witnessing the filming of what would become one of cinema's most iconic sequences. Sometimes, beauty on screen is born from real discomfort behind the scenes. Eric Liddell's legacy was controversial. In the film, Eric Liddell is portrayed as a devout Christian who refuses to run on Sunday due to his religious convictions. This detail was true and gave the story much of its emotional power. However, some historians and critics argued that the film exaggerated Liddell's religious conflict and downplayed his athletic achievements. In reality, Liddell was also known as a world-class rugby player and later became a missionary in China. where he died during World War II in a Japanese internment camp. His story was even more complex and heroic than the movie portrayed. Some viewers at the time criticized the film for focusing too narrowly on one dramatic moment, but it also introduced millions of people worldwide to Liddell's principles and sacrifice. The weird irony is that a film about running only told part of a man's much larger, extraordinary life. Harold Abraham's family objected. While many celebrated Chariots of Fire for honoring Harold Abrahams, not everyone approved of his portrayal. Abraham's family and friends were reportedly upset by certain characterizations, particularly the suggestion that he was consumed by insecurity and driven solely by a need to prove himself. They argued that Abrahams was more well-rounded, with a rich personal life that extended beyond running. His widow, Sybil, objected strongly, feeling that the movie turned her husband into a symbol rather than portraying him as a complete human being. The controversy became part of the film's weird legacy. While it won Best Picture and inspired millions, it also angered those who knew the real athletes best. The debate continues today, raising questions about how much artistic license filmmakers should take when dramatizing real people's lives. The weird fact? A film about unity sparked unexpected division among families. None of the leads were famous. One of the strangest aspects of Chariots of Fire is that it featured no major stars. Ben Cross, who played Harold Abrahams, and Ian Charleson, who played Eric Liddell, were respected stage actors, but hardly household names. Director Hugh Hudson deliberately cast relative unknowns because he wanted the audience to see the characters, not celebrities. This decision baffled some studio executives, who doubted audiences would care about unknown faces in a historical sports drama. Ironically, the lack of stars worked in the film's favor. Viewers connected with the story on a deeper level because they weren't distracted by famous personalities. After the film's success, Cross and Charleson briefly became international stars, though neither maintained long Hollywood careers. The weird truth is that one of the most famous films of the 1980s was carried not by celebrity power, but by fresh talent with passion. The costumes were inaccurate. At first glance, Chariots of Fire seems authentic to the 1920s. But costume historians have pointed out numerous inaccuracies. The runners' shorts were cut too short for the era, and many of the athletic uniforms were more 1980s in style than 1920s. The production team made these choices deliberately, arguing that audiences would find the real 1920s athletic wear unflattering and distracting. Instead, they created a hybrid look that felt period-appropriate but modernized. The weird result is that generations of viewers now imagine 1920s athletes looking much more like their 1980s counterparts. Critics of the time didn't seem to mind the film still won the Oscar for Best Costume Design. It's a strange reminder that Hollywood often bends history not for accuracy, but for aesthetics. The runners on screen looked inspirational, even if their clothes weren't quite historically correct. A struggle to find U.S. distribution. Although Chariots of Fire was a British production, it struggled to find distribution in the United States. American studios doubted that audiences would care about a film focused on British runners in the 1924 Olympics. Some executives even suggested releasing it straight to television. However, after its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, word of mouth spread, and Warner Brothers agreed to distribute it in the US. What's weird is that the movie almost vanished into obscurity before American audiences had the chance to see it. Instead, it went on to become an international success, winning 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. The hesitation of US distributors shows how easily a film can be underestimated, only to surprise everyone. Without a little luck and persistence, one of the 1980s most beloved films might never have made it across the Atlantic. The Oscars changed everything. When Chariots of Fire was first released, it did modest business at the box office. Critics liked it, but it wasn't a cultural phenomenon. Everything changed after the Academy Awards. The film won 4 Oscars in 1982, including Best Picture, Best Screenplay, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Score for Vangelis. Suddenly, audiences who had ignored the film rushed to theaters, and the box office soared. The weird part is that without the Oscars, Chariots of Fire might have been remembered as a small, overlooked British drama. Instead, it became a global hit and cultural touchstone. The Academy's recognition transformed it into one of the most iconic films of the decade. Today, the Oscars are often criticized for being out of touch, but in this case, they rescued a movie from near obscurity and secured its legendary status.